Cooper, they didn't bring us here to change the past.
Say that again.
They didn't bring us here to change the past.
They didn't bring us here at all. We brought ourselves.
Cooper. Cooper. Come here, Cooper.
If there's one common trait and one golden thread that connects the minds of elite performers, is that they believe, to some extent, that they control reality. I've seen this across athletes, artists, entrepreneurs. It seems to be a practice that keeps popping up over and over again in those that win. And so in my years of being an entrepreneur and creator, I've made it a practice to embody this. And since I have, amazing things have happened. Now, in this video, I could go down the rabbit hole of what reality really is, or I could share with you the stories of people who have implemented this practice and have gone on to win. But instead, I think I'll show you what happens when you don't negotiate with reality. What happens when you think the world is fixed, and how your life will look like if you continue to live this way, like most people do. So the truth is, reality is negotiable, and your progress in your business, in your health, in your relationships, in your career, all depends on your ability to negotiate. So what does that mean? Your ability to negotiate means to reject the default and instead live by your unique design. Most people are quick to accept default programming, and then they're shocked when they get default results. In case you didn't realize, most of your life is in your control. You are given everything you need to negotiate a better reality. If you have a sound body and mind and you do the inner work to realize this, then nothing is out of reach. Elite performers all practice this one thing, is self-accountability. Even if something uncontrollable happens, they reframe their minds to see it as trials, opportunities to adapt, iterate, or recenter. But most people live like victims, and they don't even know it. They've given up their autonomy and they find external reasons to blame for their lack of progress. Do me a favor, the next time you're in a conversation in small talk, notice how it's laced with negativity. Terrible weather we're having, or did you see what so-and-so did? See, what happens to most people is because they lack the courage to take what's theirs and reach their hands out to negotiate their reality, they develop coping mechanisms to deal with their current reality. It's far easier to accept that the game is rigged against you to begin with than it is to accept responsibility for your current results. It's always the government's fault, or your friend's fault, or your family's fault. Now, I'm not saying some people don't have it harder than others. Of course, that's objectively true. But I'm saying for the 99% of people who have the resources and a sound body and mind, they lack the courage to negotiate their reality. But where does this lack of courage or fear come from? Well, fear is just a lack of knowledge, because we're scared of what we don't know. And that's why the default setting for reality is so much easier to accept, because you can see what's around every single corner, every speed bump, and every hurdle. But to me, it's way scarier knowing exactly how my life is going to go. Every milestone, every victory, every checkpoint. If I knew that I stayed on the path of a secure job, I could probably go and buy that house by 28, and I can probably get married by 30, and I could probably have kids by 34. And if I stayed on that straight and narrow, I can retire by 65. And don't get me wrong, that sounds like a great life, but it's not my life. It's the default setting. And you might be wondering, what's wrong with the default setting? Isn't it better to secure your future in that default setting than it is to fail trying to design your own? And see, this is where I would disagree. It's much better to fail on your own path than it is to be successful on someone else's. That's a line from the Gita that I often reference, and it goes on to explain that you will never be fulfilled following someone else's path. It will always, eventually, once the facade and the illusion has faded away, lead to frustration and anger. Because your inner knowing, your intuition, knows that you're not living the reality that you negotiated, the one that aligns with your values and your purpose. The default path may lure you in with security or money or validation, but it often leads to inner dissatisfaction and a loss of identity. It's like wearing a mask that fits perfectly but actually suffocates you. Most people are walking around suffocating and they don't realize why. So fear comes from the underlying belief that reality is fixed and you have no choice in it. But I have news for you. The world is malleable. Once you set your intention, the universe does a good job of making a way for you and actually assisting you on your journey. A common coping mechanism I see is religion. People speak about the idea that if God wills it, then it will happen. And whilst in the literal sense that is true, everything is here from God's will, it contradicts our free will and the ability we were given and endowed with to create our reality. Most believe they are only entitled to a successful career if they are destined for it, or to a happy family if it is written for them. But what if you left some pages blank for you to write in? The problem when you give up your control is that you adopt this go with the flow mentality permanently, but water that goes with the flow only ever ends up down the drain. I think going with the flow is seasonal. Sometimes life requires brute force to dislodge and unblock what was stopping you from flowing once again. It requires putting your hands on the wheel instead of using autopilot. I believe that we are made in the image of and mimic the qualities of God, the highest source of good, the original source of creation, and in that same breath, we are given autonomy and freedom of choice, which is the power that we must wield carefully and precisely. We are co-creators in this world. Everything I have ever wanted and got is on the other side of fear, and two, because I set the intention that I was going to get it. I believe if the intention, if it is truly good, then that comes from God anyway. That's co-creation in action. Living idly and passively and using God's will as a cop-out, I feel, is a disservice to the qualities that you're gifted, and really is just a reflection of your lack of courage to live by design. Now, like I said, you can negotiate your reality. I use the word negotiate and negotiation for a very specific reason. Think about it. What goes into a negotiation? A negotiation requires sacrifice. It requires trade-offs. When the police negotiate with bank robbers, they're sometimes sacrificing money for hostages' lives. When a mother negotiates with her child, she sometimes trades off her comfort for the child's happiness. In a negotiation, you have to be willing to give certain things up in exchange for what you want. In other words, giving up what you want now for what you want most. The trade-offs that are required to negotiate your reality are the excuses and the coping mechanisms you developed so far living by default. You can't live by design and accept default programming. They clash. See, a lot of what you want in life, whether it's in your business or your health or your relationships, comes down to your ability to ask for it. The Bible literally says, ask and you shall receive. Knock and the door will be open for you. See, one of the tricks that is played on you in being in the default setting of reality is that you are conditioned to think that you cannot ask for more. It creates a glass ceiling on your thinking. It's only when you're exposed to people who have broken that ceiling and live in a different way, you begin to understand that the abundance that you've been looking for was right in front of you the whole time. Therefore, progress comes from your courage to ask and then your conviction in your action. The courage to take risks that other people avoid will create the conviction in your actions, and that will create the momentum in your life. The victim mentality is a virus. It will keep you trapped believing that you're destined for less. Whatever you believe, you will find evidence for, making it harder to break out of those negative cycles of thought. So breaking this loop comes down to being brutally honest about your belief systems, about your progress, and recognizing that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is literally the definition of insanity. Your world will only transform when you understand that you can negotiate with reality, and all external progress first comes from internal shifts. Completely redesigning your inner world will create ripple effects in your external reality, and it all begins with that first step of negotiation, asking for a better life, a better business, better health, and then realizing you have the ability inside of you to alchemize that into action. And then once you do that, you see real world results. Become a conscious co-creator of your world rather than living passively by. Once you make this mental switch, then everything will change. And by the way, if you're an entrepreneur, a creator, or a high-level professional and you want some tools to help you accelerate your business through self-mastery, I designed some frameworks and put together some tools for you that you can use and implement straight away to see massive shifts in your internal world and therefore in your external business. If you want them completely for free, it'll be the first link in the description below. Subscribe to this channel and over on my main channel for more, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.
We brought ourselves.
Cooper. Come on, Cooper.